Thank you for joining me on this exclusive multi-part series from the Western Journal. Recently, I had the opportunity to sit down for an in-depth, one-on-one interview with General Michael Flynn. We touched on a variety of topics, from faith to friends, and what he thinks Donald Trump will most be remembered for. The interview is in multiple parts, so sit back, grab a cup of coffee, or the beverage of your choice, and enjoy. A guest today, who I don't think it needs any introduction to anybody who knows the Western Journal's audience at all, General Michael Flynn. We're so glad to have you with us, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here, and we're out in Anthem, Arizona, and it's a beautiful, beautiful day. And this has been a long time in coming to get out here to be able to do a face-to-face and learn a little bit about what the Western Journal is about and see some of the back end stuff, and it's kind of cool. You guys have a great operation, you got a great team, and you all ought to be proud about what it is that you produce, what you create.
We are. Thank you very much. And you've been part of that. You've published a number of op-eds with us that have done very well.
I appreciate that. From you. Definitely appreciate that.
And I didn't realize until very recently, you and I are both, not only are we both veterans, but we're both old-time New Englanders. I grew up about an hour north of you in Foxborough.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, how about that? That's pretty cool. You got to be a Patriots fan then, right?
Yeah,
otherwise stay out of Foxborough.
Just a little.
Yeah.
I spent every summer pretty much on the Rhode Island coast.
Oh, no kidding. I always tell I love Rhode Island. I don't like the way it is politically right now, but I always tell people, because everybody goes, Rhode Island, if you're not from, if you don't know much about geography, or certainly the United States geography. But I always tell people that Rhode Island, it takes you about 1 hour to drive across the state, but it has 400 miles of the most beautiful coastline you'll ever see.
Yeah.
And and I actually live and grew up on an island in Narragansett Bay. Yep. So that was pretty cool. So the ocean has always been part of my life, I probably, before I could even walk, I was probably thrown into a pool, and and you're either going to sink or swim. Right. That's sort of the way it was in our house. So, but yeah, that's kind of neat. And also your service in the Army.
Yes, sir. Yeah, late 80s. I think we were both at Bragg.
Yeah, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It's where it's the home of the airborne, home of Special Operations Forces, and so it's interesting. Yeah, I loved it there. I had.
I met my wife there.
Yeah, one of my sons was born there and attended high school. I mean, we spent the better part of 17 years. So half of my career was spent at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I love it. I love North Carolina, and the things the friends that we made there. We just actually spent a couple of days at the surprise birthday party of one of our closest friends who we met there the first day we arrived at Fort Bragg, and we've been friends ever since.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, my father-in-law was in Delta and retired out of Fort Bragg, so I've been in Fayetteville since...
Forever.
Yeah, 70s.
Yeah, wow,
so
wow.
Quite a while.
That's
a long time to hang on Fayetteville.
Yeah.
But, so I've got a wide range of topics here for you, General, and some more personal, some a little more future of the country. I really want to look forward. We've got a lot of challenges facing us. I know you agree with that. But I'd love to start off just kind of defining a couple of terms, because there's so many words that we throw out on the left and the right.
Right.
And what it means depends on who you're talking to. So let me ask you, when you say deep state, how would you define that term? What do you mean by deep state when you use that phrase?
Yeah, I mean, and when I use that phrase, I try to define it. To try to let people know, what does this mean? Because it's just this nebulous phrase, deep state, right? And what it really is it's an overbearing and overgrown bureaucracy that is part of this sort of military, industrial, and to a degree, police complex. And police being the senior law enforcement, the senior judicial components of our government, because it's not just military industrial complex that Eisenhower described.
Right.
it's a combination of complexities in the United States government, principally in Washington, D.C., and then, of course, those tentacles reach out all the way across the country, and they reach out all around the world.
Sure.
But principally that swamp or the deep state is this very complex set of entities. It includes this military-industrial complex as defined by Eisenhower, who not only defined it, but also warned us about it in an exit speech in 1961. And then as time goes on, as time went on, and here we are in 2021 today, we now have more of a, I would call it a security state. So maybe a better way to define this is really a military-industrial security complex that I'm sitting here today, and my warning to America is that, and I pray that it's not too late, but my warning to America is that that's what the deep state is about, and it's sort of, the marionette in the game, in the play here, are these people that are long in the tooth politicians,
right,
or these entities that swim around the swamp of Washington, D.C., and the entities are think tanks and some of the big lobbying
sure,
organizations that they swim and they eat at the sides of this thing, and that's how they feed. So if you want to use that as a metaphor, I mean, I think that's appropriate. And they feed off of this military-industrial security complex to the tune of, millions, then billions, and now trillions. Yeah. So when we look at, I think the latest budget that I'm aware of that's coming out of the House is I think it's somewhere between $3 and $4 trillion. I mean, extraordinary amounts of money. So that's what it really is. It's this military-industrial security complex that we need, that the American public needs to be aware of. That is some of it is solvable. So how do you fix this? How do you correct this? Well, some of it is just going to require extraordinary leadership by extraordinary leaders, that we still, and the willingness to be fearless about what it is that we are up against, and to then fight your way into a place where you can actually make changes to this military-industrial security complex. And everybody goes, no way. Well, then if you feel that way, for anybody that listens to this or reads anything about this interview, if you feel that way, that means that you've given up. You've given up on everything. But if you haven't given up and you feel that you can help to fix this, how do we do that? Well, I know we got other things you want to talk about, but I think it's really I think it's really important to know that the founders, the creation of our country, first is really, or was, divine providence. Mm-hmm. It still is, although I feel like we're going through a test. But the creation of our country, and I use creation, like the word creator, right? So the creation of our country was not decided by a top-down view, right? Like the founders that studied and argued and debated and fought literally to get us to where we actually put the primatur on the Constitution, which was not 1776, it was later on, but that when they were fighting to do that, when they were discussing this, they didn't start at the top and say, well, we're going to have this federal government, and then we're going to work our way down, and then we're going to give out some freedoms to these people down here, to these minions, to these serfs, whatever. Right. Actually, what they did it just the opposite, which is the brilliance of our founders, the brilliance of the vision that they had to see well into the future, because they understood tyranny, they understood persecution, they understood all of the challenges that nations that were existing or did exist in history prior to that, to the United States of America, existing. They understood many of the challenges because they studied them. These were really bright people.
Right.
So they...
I put it in airplane mode and I thought that would turn it off. My fault.
No, that's okay. It's like, I thought that was a coyote knocking at the door.
We did have one right after.
Yeah. I saw one yesterday chasing a roadrunner. It reminded me of that cartoon.
Yeah.
And I started thinking of that. I was out doing PT this morning, and I started singing that song. Right? It goes, the roadrunner, coyotes after you.
Yeah,
right?
well,
So anyway, to take us back to the beginning here, the founders, they actually started at the bottom. They started with human liberty and human freedoms, and they started with faith. And that's where they put the strength and the meat of our Constitution, was on individual liberties. And that's the strength. That is the principal strength among the idea that this thing was a divinely providential, creation, because you can only explain it that way because of all the various miracles that had to occur through sacrifice and through commitment and through discernment and discipline. So they started with the individual, and they created individual liberties, and then they went up the ladder. Then they went up the scale, and then they started looking at states' rights, because the states were still 13 colonies, and they wanted to be individual. They wanted individual things, right? The states wanted individual things.
Sure.
So they argued for those things, and they created different entities. I mean, even fast forward to today, many of the states that are still part of the original colonies, and even some that came on later on, but certainly the original colonies, have certain things, laws that go all the way back to that point in time. And that's why in this, which I'm sure we'll talk about, some of this stuff going on in our own election system and election processes, which is one of the most cherished institutions of our liberties, is the ability to be able to have a free and fair vote. But they gave states rights, and then they came up to the federal level, and they said, okay, what's remaining essentially? What do we give to the federal government? And they actually gave the federal government very few things to do. Right. Worry about your borders, worry about external forces, right? I mean, foreign affairs and stuff and such like that. The diplomacy of a nation, right? Do those kinds of things. And what has happened in time is we the people have allowed this entity that we have in Washington D.C. and this political the political machinations to flip that around and take more control away from we the people, and take more control away from the states. And we're now doing it less by law and more by fiat, called an executive order. Right. So that's really important. And it's the boiling of the frog effect, right? So America, you've been sitting in a boiling pot of water, and all of a sudden you're now like going, wow, it's like really hot, and you're trying to grab hold of the edge of the pot, and you can't reach it because they did it just right. There's enough water that's steamed out, you've sunk down, and now you're about to boil, and the potential to being eaten by these alligators that swim in this swamp is very real. The one thing that I know that is a fact, and it's a fact of life, it's a fact of history, is that nation states rise and fall. It's a fact. Right. I always say, when was the last time you met somebody from Byzantine? Well, maybe there's a Byzantine, Arizona town or something, but I mean, I use that in a facetious way, but in a realistic way, to describe what it is that I'm talking about, the rise and fall of nation states, because it is a fact of life that nation states rise and they fall, and they go away. They go, sort of the way of the wolf, right? And so you never met anybody from Byzantine, because that empire, which is one of the oldest empires that ever existed, doesn't exist anymore. Right. It rose, it had an existence, and it died. The Athenian Empire, right? I mean, there's so many. Roman Empire, even the British Empire. Right. So there's so many that in the history of the world, and I think that that's super important for us to understand as Americans, because how long will we last as a nation state? And the further and further we move away from our Judeo-Christian principles and values that this country was founded upon, the further we move away from that, the more we remove faith, and particularly God, because there's different faiths, and I respect that, but the more that we remove God from our lives, our lifeblood or our lives, the further we're gonna fall into this abyss, and the abyss is in many cases the abyss is unrecoverable. And so I want to be on the side of the abyss right now where it is still recoverable. And I believe it is because, I believe that there are a lot of Christians on this planet, and certainly in this country, that are now seeing this nation at risk. Yep. And it doesn't mean that, I'm going to force my Christian faith down your throat, right. But it means that, people are going to have to do, I always say prayer is the most powerful weapon system known to man. But after you pray, you got to stand up. And now, this phrase that I use is local action has a national impact. Mm-hmm. So, for all the listeners, if you're done praying, stand up and go do something and stop complaining. Because the foundation of America, if the foundation of America was built on solid rock, just like the foundation of the church, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. If the foundation of America was built on solid rock, that rock has deteriorated. And a house built on sand will not withstand the storm that is coming. And that storm that is coming is a loss of faith in something that got us here, whether you want to believe it or not. You just look at what George Washington experienced as Colonel Washington on the battlefield, fighting with Braddock against the French and Indians, all the way to all the machinations and all the battles that he incurred along the way, fighting for this country, all the way to the point of time where he became the president of the United States, first president of the United States. I mean, it's like miracle, miracle, miracle. I mean, it's just incredible. There's too many coincidences to say, I mean, it's either you believe in destiny or you don't. And if you don't believe in destiny, then I really feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for somebody who doesn't believe in the destiny of the Creator, because America is the destiny of the Creator, and it was necessary because from really 12, 13, 1400, certainly in the 15 and 1600s, the Christianity and faith was being persecuted and tyranny was big time on the rise in Europe, Europe writ large. And so then you started having these people taken off to this thing called the New Country, right? The New World. The New World, right? There was no America at that time. They were just running from being persecuted to say, I'm going to go find someplace in the middle of nowhere because we heard about it and there's great things happening, and we're going to go discover the New World, and we're going to create a world that's based on religious liberty and our own personal freedoms, instead of being dictated to by a king or a monarch or a dictator or a tyrannical, leader.
So it seems clear to me, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, it seems clear to me that you feel America's at a point we've never been at before, that this is a crisis that is new. We haven't experienced this before. Not everybody feels that way. Yeah. A guy named Kevin Williamson, you may know him, he's a writer for National Review, who generally I actually like. Mm-hmm. Don't always agree with him, but smart guy. He wrote this week, I think, about Christianity in politics. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he said was that it kind of depends, Christian leaders, religious leaders in politics, depend on this idea that irresistible evil is on the verge of taking over. Mm-hmm. But his point is that it's always on the verge of taking over, that, this is nothing new, in essence, is what he's saying. So how do you respond to somebody who I think, I don't want to put words in his mouth, I think in essence what he's saying is, look, these folks, they may very well be sincere, but they're also sincerely fundraising off this idea,
sure.
Right? They're sincerely, trying to sell hats with their motto on them or whatever. How do you respond to somebody like that who doesn't think that this is an especially critical time? How do you describe this as being different from other crises that America has faced?
And I don't know him, and I don't think I read that article, but I think and again, I'll speak for myself.
Sure.
I think that people, so first of all, there has always been and there always will be evil.
Right.
There has been and there always will be good.
Right.
Good people and evil people. Evil situations and good situations. I mean, we're getting ready to, next month or into September is going to be the 20th anniversary of the attacks on 9/11. Right. I mean, that was an evil act. Right. So that's a force of evil that did that to this country, to our country, and we're still at war. I mean, whether they want to say, well, we're pulling out, still people that are, so that's just an example of evil.
Right.
Okay? Evil situation, evil people. Is there evil in politics? Well, I mean, so how do you define evil? You can define it through greed. You can define it through, an ego that's out of control. You can define it through selfishness, right? And on the good side, you define it through the acts of kindness, right? I mean, someone who gives to others before they give to themselves. Someone who constantly treats others like they want to be treated, right? Someone who is willing to have an open mind about a situation and try to understand it, but still make the harder right decision. And I think that's good. I think that's a good way to be, sure, versus an evil way to be where you just take the easier right, or you take the easier way out of a situation, and that's not the good way. That's right. It's almost like you're going to sort of take the money and run, to use a phrase, right? So, do those entities exist? I absolutely believe they exist. He's right. I mean, he says that they've always kind of been there. They've been there since the beginning of time.
Sure.
Been there since the beginning of time. And I mean, in a biblical sense, don't touch the apple, right? Don't take a bite out of the apple. Was that good or bad? Well, if in a biblical sense, it was really bad.